all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. And let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father, which is in heaven. In this manner, therefore, shall you pray. Our Father, who art in heaven.
Okay. So, already right there, let me go back to this. If you remember our discussion from last week, you'll know that this has nothing to do with actual Israel or Palestine. I don't know where they shot this. It looks like they shot it in Arizona or something. Yeah. But you know, this was before they kind of had done some of this research as to where it might have actually been, I think, or actually it was after, and I think maybe the filmmakers didn't care. But you see, you've got Jesus, he's kind of gesticulating up there. He's kind of hitting all the poses that you see in all the iconography. And he's got the 12 disciples sitting closest to him, and then all the crowds kind of standing there and watching on this giant cliff. Okay, so that's one interpretation. Here is another look at the Franco Zeffirelli version, which we saw a few weeks ago, but I'm going to start at a different spot and hear him talk about the Lord's Prayer. Here we go. 1 second. Let's do the Optimax.
Blessed are you when people abuse you and persecute you and speak all kinds of calumny against you for my sake. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward will be great in heaven, as it was for the prophets persecuted before you. In your prayers, remember your Father knows what your needs are before you ask him. This is how you should pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
So, yeah, Carol.
I find it interesting that Robert Powell looks exactly like the iconic portrait of Jesus that hung in every Catholic home.
Exactly. Well, that famous painting of Jesus with the long blonde hair and the blue eyes kind of turning left that you see. That painting came out in the late 60s. So this movie came out about, within 10 years later. So that's what they were going for.
Yeah.
And and what's you can see too, and I think it's a really good point. We've come a long way in the last couple decades of realizing that's not actually probably what he looked like. But what they were going for was an emotion, I think. And that the way you can see in the filmmaking, the difference of movies. So one was in 65 and this one's 76. They've got the long scope. You never saw Jesus in that first clip, right? It's just all long view. Here, it gradually gets closer and closer on him, so that's just his face. And then you got the music swelling and the performance. So it's trying to like elicit an emotional response to you, just like seeing him should elicit a emotional response.
Struck me, I've seen that movie a bunch, but
Yeah.
it struck me right now this time that everybody else has, I mean, they all wore robes and stuff, but everybody else has actual robes on and clothes. And he looks like he's already in a shroud.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Exactly.
His outfit looks like a shroud.
Like
And-
a mummy.
And I
Right.
would think, I would wonder if the director and maybe the actor too well, actually, we're gonna hear from the actor in a second. But he's live. He's right here on the screen. No, I've got a clip.
We got excited.
Yeah, no, yeah, straight from England. I think, one, they were going for an actor, they wanted somebody to perform, but they also wanted, it's not like they cast everyone else as old white British actors. There are some British actors, but there are a lot of people of color or people that pass for people of color in that crowd and in the whole movie. And I think there might be, you could argue a point saying there's something about Jesus that's kind of ethereal and otherworldly. He's not quite like,
More angelic.
yeah, like just kind of slightly removed from the actual people with the
Right.
blue eyes and he
Right.
never blinks. There's like something
Right.
a little off or out there about
Great
it.
teeth.
Great teeth, yeah. For a breath, are you kind of looking to see, are there got any feelings? Right.
Sorry.
Another comment I wanted to make is with the first clip you showed with Max von Sydow,
Yeah,
it struck me that towards the end, he called the crowd
right.
the light of the world.
Yeah.
He called them the light of the world. He didn't refer it to
From
himself, or
yeah.
it all turned back. They all started calling him the light of the world, but I'd never noticed that before.
Yeah, no,
that
that's
he
from
was
Matthew.
calling-
So we're gonna get to that in a second. Yeah, it's a different use of that imagery than John's gospel where he says,
Right.
I am the light of the world, right?
My mom and grandma had a picture of Jesus. And probably not up, it was a darker skinned person and busting a gut laughing. It is the only picture I've ever seen in my life of
I've
Jesus
seen that, yeah.
playful
Is that the
and happy
Crucio-
and
is that the Crucio prize? There's the portrait. He's not real dark though, but he's got shorter hair and it's kind of curly and wispy and
I don't remember exact, but I just remember he was laughing, like it was just a playful picture and I'm like, oh,
Right.
it's one thing I wish.
It syncs
would've
up with
taken
the other
from that.
aspects, the loving the little children and turning water into wine. That's where that Jesus.
Yes, he
yeah.
was serious, but he was a person,
Joy to laugh, yeah.
what I mean?
Now, this clip is fun. I would never have heard this movie unless I was in seminary and I had an elective class where it was about films and depictions of
Films
Jesus.
was a good
Yeah.
idea.
Oh, yeah. So I'm stealing this from my teacher. And this was an Italian movie from the 60s by a filmmaker whose last name is Pasolini. And the movie is called The Gospel According to Matthew. So it's kind of funny. It's like they're sticking straight to Matthew. They're not trying to conflate the four gospels. And it was originally in black and white and in Italian. Here it's been colorized after the fact and is dubbed in English. It was kind of the clearest version I could find. But let's look how they deal with this differently, filmmaking wise.
Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are you when men revile you and persecute you, and say all manner of evil against you falsely because of me. Rejoice and exult, because your heavenly reward shall be great. Thus did they persecute the prophets who went before you. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its strength, what is there to salt it with? It is no longer of any use. It is to be thrown out for men to trod underfoot. You are the light of the world. If it is set high on a mountain, no city can be hidden. Neither do men light a lamp and put it under a bushel, but rather on a lampstand, so as to give light to all the people in the house. No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or devote himself to the one and despise the other. You must serve either God or riches. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you not to resist the evildoer. And if a man smite thee on the right cheek, let him smite thee also on the other. You have heard that it was said, a man should love his neighbor and hate his enemies. But I say to you, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you, in order that you may become your heavenly Father's children, who makes his sun to rise on the evil and equally on the good, who makes his rain to fall on the just and equally on the unjust. Moreover, in praying, do not multiply the words and phrases in the manner of the heathen, for they think that by saying a great deal they shall be heard. Do not be like unto them. Your Father in heaven knows well what your needs are, even before you ask. Therefore your prayer shall be thus. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom.
Okay, so we know where you're going there.
Thy will be done on earth.
Excuse me. I'm still hearing that voice. There we go. So I think what's interesting about that is the jump cuts. So it's like they used every take. Not a very attractive Jesus until maybe that one sunny shot, I think.
Very dark.
So
The short hair.
short hair, unibrow. And then you have all the stuff with like the changing weather and the lightning and he's kind of screaming at you. Jerry and I were joking. He's like, "You're the light of the world," and it sounds like a threat. Right. And it's pretty overwhelming because it also gives you that kind of idea that he's been talking for days. You know, like time is passing, and that's funny how the message there is interpreted as something kind of urgent and almost terrifying. Anyway, pretty fun.
Yeah, very like just demanding.
Very different. Yeah.
Come to me gently.
Yeah.
Very
It's really wild.
come to me. These are the things you're going to do.
That's right.
Sounds like.
Okay, and now we're gonna go switch to this last clip. And somebody mentioned this last week. Might have been you, Carol, but it was a documentary on Nat Geo called Real Jesus of Nazareth.
Right,
And it's with the actor Robert Powell, who plays young, sexy, blonde, blue-eyed Jesus. Now, in the modern day, I think it was filmed about 15 years ago, but and he's going to Jerusalem and Galilee and all these sites to see kind of where they shot the film and his kind of reflections on playing the part. And here, this is a section and with some scholars kind of talking too. I'm bummed Barb's not here because she's going to be physically at some of these places. So this kind of brings together everything we've been talking about the Sermon on the Mount. This is a few minutes here. One of the professors who speaks is a man, American, with a beard, kind of receding hairline. When you see him, that was my professor in undergrad at UNC Chapel Hill. He's a religion professor there. So here we go. Whoop. Let me share the screen. And this is again called The Real Jesus of Nazareth.
From his base of Capernaum, Jesus traveled around Galilee preaching. The crowds drawn to him were often people desperate for a better life. At the peak of his ministry, Jesus gave a revolutionary sermon that occupies 3 whole chapters in the Gospel of Matthew.
Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God.
The Sermon on the Mount is perhaps Jesus' most well-known speech. Jesus doesn't provide a rule book for how to live your life, but if he did, this would be the closest thing to it. It's here that we get his most concentrated ethical instructions about how you should relate to other human beings.
40 years after playing Jesus, Robert Powell has vivid memories of filming this iconic scene.
Blessed are those who are persecuted in the cause of right.
I haven't seen any of this for 30 years plus. It's interesting because what it evokes is the moment we shot it. I can't remember how many people were there, but there must have been at least 1,000. And I'm an actor, therefore, given an audience, I will perform, which is what Jesus did. He had an audience, so he performed. It is an 8-minute speech, so I had to learn it, obviously. And that's quite nerve-wracking. But when I started on this day, I looked, and I saw all these people in front of me.
Rejoice and be glad,
So I raised my voice even more.
for they shall see God.
And that had a remarkable effect. It had a remarkable effect on the people I was talking to, and it had a remarkable effect on the crew, who all burst into tears.
Blessed are those who are persecuted in the cause of right,
It just was extraordinary.
for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
I suddenly heard these words virtually for the first time.
Blessed are you when people abuse you and persecute you.
I started to think about their meaning as I was delivering it.
Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth.
And I got touched by the Sermon on the Mount. They are the most profound thing that has ever been said about man's humanity to his fellow man, and remained so. That day was extraordinary for all of us.
And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
Christian tradition has marked this place as the location of the Sermon on the Mount for more than 1,600 years. It's known today as the Mount of Beatitudes. It lies on the north shore of the Sea of Galilee, less than a mile from Capernaum. On its summit is a church where pilgrims come to commemorate the 8 Beatitudes, or blessings, that Jesus delivered in his sermon. Today, the Beatitudes serve as moral guidance for Christians. But in Jesus' time, their meaning would have been revolutionary and would have resonated deeply with his audience. The blessings spoke directly to the disadvantaged, those experiencing poverty, persecution, pain, and sadness. In Jesus' teachings, they are the ones who will be blessed by God.
The Beatitudes, in which Jesus calls the poor blessed, seem very counterintuitive to anyone at the time. How could the poor be blessed? And that seems like a kind of radical social revolution, that Jesus is reversing the values that people would have grown up with.
These radical ideas continue in the prayer Jesus recited on the Mount, one that more than 2 billion Christians still recite today, the Lord's Prayer.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come.
While different versions exist according to the church denomination, the meaning of the prayer is universal.
He indicates that people should embody the values of the kingdom. To enter into the kingdom, our sins have to be forgiven. Our debts to God have to be forgiven, but we need to embody that in our own lives by forgiving the debts of others.
Forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. Today, it can be interpreted as a general plea for forgiveness. But to a first-century audience, the reality of debt was terrifying.
Most people in the ancient world were subsistence farmers, and it's very easy for that sort of farming to get you into debt, particularly with a bad crop or a bad season. And you could be enslaved in some communities for that debt. So when we talk about debt and debtors, we're not just talking about a bit of financial crisis, we're talking about a real existential crisis. You might lose not just your land, but your whole status as a free man.
Slaves are referenced frequently in the New Testament, and slavery was widespread across the Roman world. In the Lord's Prayer, Jesus was tapping into the genuine fears of ordinary people. For increasingly desperate communities suffering under Roman rule, his radical message promised change. But it also challenged them to forgive their enemies.
By Jesus' time, there's a long history of Jewish resentment against foreign rule. The Roman legions were extremely brutal. They came down from the north through Galilee and they stamped out opposition wherever they saw it. They burned cities to the ground, they raped and pillaged.
Jesus was promising those living in a violent world a better way of life.
A kingdom where God is in charge. And this is a very potent message to people who are living under the domination of Rome.
Hey,
Oh, I wanna
pretty
see
cool,
the
huh?
movie.
Yeah, it's a really good documentary. You could find it most places too. YouTube.
Matthew.
Yep. If you Google it, you should be able to find it. So there we go. Thank you for indulging me a little bit.
And you said it's called The Real Jesus?
It's called The Real Jesus of Nazareth. I think it's like 4 episodes.
Yeah,
And they kind of go through
it
everything.
was.
Yeah. Really fun. The scene where Robert Powell, the actor, is in modern times and he's worshiping in a church, it looks like. Oh, it doesn't look like he's worshiping. He looks like he's pretending to worship. Yeah. Well, no, it's when he's sitting in a pew and you see kind of this footage of like a priest and all. That's actually the Episcopal Cathedral in Jerusalem, and Episcopal, like American Episcopal. We have a province there, and that was the former bishop who's retired. And then there was a younger man who was wearing a green stole. He's now the bishop. Yeah, so it's really funny. Anyway, I loved what they said about the Sermon on the Mount and just setting more context to it about just the role reversal he's talking about and how that would have been received. I think that's just good stuff to know.
I think that even though it's in the Bible, it would be received the same way in a lot of these evangelical churches.
Sure, yeah. That's right.
And it does say, blessed are the poor in spirit, which is both financial poor and not. So it doesn't mean if you have money, you're not. But what I like about the Beatitudes is, okay, so if you're poor in spirit, you get kingdom of heaven. If you mourn, you'll be comforted. At no point does it say, if you are Episcopal, you get heaven.
Right.
Exactly.
If you are not Jewish, you get heaven.
Right.
It says if you lead a Christian, or not even Christian life,
Yeah.
you lead a good life,
A moral life.
Right.
a moral life, then,
Right.
and it doesn't always,
A
if you
loving
mourn, you'll
life.
be comforted. It says nothing about religion.
Right.
Right.
Religion is not a part of it. Following the Bible is not a part of it. Leading a good moral
Well, there
life.
was no Bible at
Well,
the
yeah.
time of the Beatitudes, but
But it doesn't say you have to be Episcopal to go to heaven.
No, that's
It
right.
doesn't even say you have to be Christian.
Jesus wasn't around to proofread the Bible.
Yeah.
before it was published.
But
But
being
no, I
It's
didn't
a
really
great, no,
say
it's a
that.
it's a really great point. I mean,
a good moral life.
these are pretty clean and basic to us now, but they weren't being specific. It was broad back then. of
Yeah.
Just
And-
how to be in the world.
Well,
right?
Because he was taking a chance standing in front of all those people and
Right.
risking his life.
Yeah,
to proclaim what he was there to do.
exactly.
Again, I still think it's, it's still kind of controversial, this idea, because, a lot of people, I've heard a lot of people refer to the Bible as the anesthetic for the poor, for the masses, to make them, comply to the government or the whatever is there at the
Sure, yeah.
time.
I think that message of blessed are you who are poor, whether it's poor in spirit, and Luke's gospel disagrees. Regardless, if you're wealthy or you're a Pharisee or something, you hear that message, then you do get worried. It sounds a little bit like, well, wait a minute, they're blessed. What about me? And then what happens if there is a role reversal? Where do I belong in this kingdom?
And the blessed are those who are persecuted, because you're supposed to be afraid of being persecuted.
Exactly.
Right, that's the
Yeah.
whole point. Like,
Right.
don't get persecuted, because that's scary.
Mm.
But if being persecuted for righteousness is going to be a good thing for you, that's sort of threatening to power structures, I think.
It is
I mean,
very much.
We've talked,
Absolutely. this is a bottom-up message, I think. And as someone already pointed out, that Marx said religion is the opiate of the masses, but it's religion. He didn't necessarily say specifically, you know, and I'm not sure you would use that the Sermon on the Mount to to exemplify that. But like I've heard others say, the message of Jesus, both in the beginning of Luke and the beginning of Matthew, is very much a bottom-up gospel, where that the people who are being lifted up are the underclass, the people who are under suffering, the people, and rather than the people who are rich and powerful. And it's a very much bottom-up gospel. Yeah.
Great. Well, let's read. Ta-da! Let's Bible study. So we're picking back up at verse 13. And again, so the Beatitudes, again, to kind of zooming out real quick, the Sermon on the Mount is Matthew's big piece, his big gift. This is the part that's most unique to Matthew, is the way he's constructed this whole thing. And like you saw in the Italian film, where it looks like it takes over days, this takes over chapters. So 3 chapters of the Sermon on the Mount, but virtually uninterrupted, I think. And the Beatitudes are, getting more specific, the first part, almost like the overture, we the people, if you will. And here is, now he's continuing with some new subjects, and your Bible translations may break up these subjects with little headings too, or not. So here's the first one, and I'm reading from the Common English Bible. Okay. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt loses its saltiness, how will it become salty again? It's good for nothing except to be thrown away and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city on top of a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a basket. Instead, they put it on top of a lampstand, and it shines on all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before people, so they can see the good things you do and praise your Father who is in heaven. Don't even begin to think that I have come to do away with the law and the prophets. I haven't come to do away with them, but to fulfill them. I say to you very seriously that as long as heaven and earth exist, neither the smallest letter nor even the smallest stroke of a pen will be erased from the law until everything there becomes a reality. Therefore, whoever ignores one of the least of these commands and teaches others to do the same will be called the lowest in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever keeps these commands and teaches people to keep them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. I say to you that unless your righteousness is greater than the righteousness of the legal experts and the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Okay, let me pause there. Probably could have paused before that section, but I bet you all have heard or familiar with the salt of the earth. These come up in our lectionary a lot. The light on the hill.
The song.
You can almost hear Ronald Reagan in your head, quoting Peggy Noonan, probably, who wrote them, saying, "Shining city on the hill." All that all had an origin, came from here. And I'm also thinking of looking at Charity, thinking of VBS, hide it under a bushel. Kids will understand this idea. Why would you hide that light?
Although being salty now means being like grumpy and angry and a little bitter. So when you tell them to be salty, you have to kind of explain that's not what you mean.
Yes, yeah, he should have said cinnamon or something.
Okay, but it says don't hide your light, let it shine. But then again, you're also not supposed to go around and really tout what you do. You're just, I guess, supposed to do it by example.
Yeah.
Because they
show your talents without being boastful.
Yeah, exactly.
And how do that?
Shine. Not show off, but shine, radiate.
You just.
And then he starts to get into the law and the prophets. That's very big, huge statement of Jesus to say, I'm not doing away with the law and the prophets. I am the law and the prophets, I'm the fulfillment.
The law of Moses.
Right.
Chosen.
The law, Moses, prophets, Elijah, think of, we're going to get to that scene where he's at the transfiguration and we see an image of Moses and Elijah. It's kind of symbolic, like Jesus is picking up their mantle.
Oh, yeah.
I was just thinking, kind of like building off of what David said, these are people who no one would have told them you're very important.
Right.
They never would have said you're important to this earth. Like you are the salt, you are the light, you are important, and what you do is important and good. Because I just feel like, especially the disenfranchised, the lower classes, never would have thought anything they did was, they were just supposed to listen and do what
Right.
people told them. And I just think it's a very much lifting up of those people.
Absolutely. You know, first of all, they probably think they're being punished or cursed from just the way their life has turned out. And then here they've first been told they're blessed.
Right? Or being.
Yeah, and then they're told to shine their light, their inward light and all. And now they're being told, that the things to do to quote unquote get into heaven. I'm using that phrase loosely here. But to be a child of God fully, are within reach. Everybody has the control and the power to be righteous, to be this person, even if you don't have the power to overcome your poverty and place in society and all, but you do have the power to be a moral, ethical person, a person of love.
And if you could be more righteous than the Pharisees.
Exactly.
Then it's not something
But
reserved for that group.
I'm confused. Is he
Yeah.
saying the Pharisees aren't gonna get into heaven by that?
Not at the current bar that they've
Okay,
set for
because
themselves.
I
Yeah.
bought a new Bible, I bought
Oh.
the Message, but in here it says, unless you do far better than the Pharisees in the matters of right living, you won't know the first thing about entering the kingdom.
Yeah.
So.
I think,
Go ahead, David.
I was just gonna say, I think we need to be careful about what Matthew's saying when he says kingdom of heaven. And I don't think we need to equate this with heaven. I think the kingdom of heaven is the kingdom that Jesus is bringing on the earth. It can reflect later into an eternal life, but the kingdom of heaven is right here, the kingdom that he's bringing to institute, at least in part, in the world right now.
Yeah, this Bible says kingdom of heaven. This Bible just says the kingdom.
Oh, yeah.
But to me, it sounds kind of, it sounds kind of contradictory here where the verse right before that says, therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do so will be called least in the kingdom. It's not saying they won't go to the kingdom. He just said they'll be at the bottom. So.
Yeah.
I know Mormons believe in the hierarchy,
Right.
depending on
So,
what level you are.
I mean, he doesn't mention hell in here at all.
Yeah. But again, like David's saying, he's talking about this kingdom
This
of heaven
kingdom,
being
yeah.
ushered onto the
Yeah.
earth, right?
And he's putting a qualification on it too, that neither the smallest letter nor even the smallest stroke of a pen will be erased from the law until everything there becomes a reality. And I think what he's saying is, in his coming and his death, his resurrection, it's become a reality. And that, Paul talks about that later too, but I think he's kind of hinting at what he's saying is that the law, I didn't come to break the law. I came to fulfill the law, to become the law, and to make the law a reality on, in your lives and in your hearts.
Absolutely. Well, he's got more to say. Would someone like to read 21 to, let's see, maybe 21 to 32? It's a lot to chew on.
I'll
Got the message?
I'll read out of my new Bible.
All right.
The heading on this one is murder.
Okay.
Murder most foul. Okay. You're familiar with the command to the ancients, do not murder. I'm telling you that anyone who is so much as angry with a brother or sister is guilty of murder. Carelessly call a brother idiot, and you just might find yourself hauled into court. Thoughtlessly yelled stupid at a sister, and you are on the brink of hellfire. The simple moral fact is that words kill. This is how I want you to conduct yourself in these matters. If you enter life of God worship, am I not in the right place?
No, you're right.
Okay. It follows that you don't fuss about what's on the table at meal times or whether the clothes in your closet are in fashion. There is far more to your life than the food you put in your stomach, more to your outer appearance than the clothes you hang on your body. Look at the bird.
Maybe you are in a different
yeah,
spot.
that is the wrong place.
Okay.
It was working so far and then suddenly I was like, "Whoop."
Okay, so I'll go back to, this is how I want you to conduct yourself in these matters. That's verse 23.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
If you enter your place of worship and about to make an offering, you suddenly remember a grudge a friend has against you, abandon your offering, leave immediately, go to this friend and make things right. Then and only then come back and work things out with God. Or say you're out on the street and an old enemy accosts you. Don't lose a minute. Make the first move. Make things right with him. After all, if you leave the first move to him, knowing his track record, you're likely to end up in court, maybe even jail. If that happens, you won't get out without a stiff fine. The next one is adultery and divorce. You know the next commandment pretty well, too. Don't go to bed with another spouse. Don't think you've preserved your virtue simply by staying out of bed. Your heart can be corrupted by lust even quicker than your body. Those oogling looks you think nobody notices, they're also corrupt. Let's not pretend this is easier than it really is. If you want to live in a morally pure life, here's what you have to do. You have to blind your right eye the moment you catch it in a lustful leer. You have to choose to live one-eyed or else be dumped on a moral trash heap. And you have to chop off your right hand the moment you notice it raised threateningly. Better a bloody stump than your entire being discarded for good in the dump. Remember the scripture that says, whoever divorces his wife, let him do it legally, giving her divorce papers and her legal rights. Too many of you are using that as a cover for selfishness and whim, pretending to be righteous just because you are legal. Please, no more pretending. If you divorce your wife, you're responsible for making her an adulteress, unless she has already made herself that by sexual promiscuity. And if you marry such a divorced adulteress, you're automatically an adulterer yourself. You can't use legal cover to mask a moral failure.
What are you reading from? What are you reading from, Carol?
The Message.
What'd you say, Pam?
Oh, that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah.
What she was.
It's very liberal translations there, but interesting. Yeah.
And the pages are so new, they stick together easily. I apologize.
Are these versions, including the Message, are they actually translations or are they just paraphrases? Putting it into different
A bit of both, but yeah, this is Eugene Peterson's translation went back to the original Greek and then tried to put it in modern text. So it is a bit of paraphrasing.
So are these,
to try to get the exact point across.
is this translation being as modern as it is it condoned by most of the Christian denominations?
Well, I don't know about most denominations, but ours for sure.
Okay.
It's a conversation partner. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Yeah. What do you think of some of these rules of adultery?
I think the first section about adultery, it probably might not have a lot of resonance with people who were cradle Episcopalians, but if you grew up in a more evangelical tradition, they have this whole purity culture that's based on basically the concept that women are at fault for men's lust, and it places a lot of blame on women or responsibility for women on how men are are going to behave, that they need to behave, they need to behave certain ways and dress certain ways. But this scripture seems to be quite clear that the problem shouldn't be placed on the woman, but on the person who's doing the observation. This kind of turns that whole purity culture, which has kind of been really unhealthy for people on its head. And the fact that you can't blame someone for causing you to sin. The sin comes comes from you, from your behavior, your attitudes. Yeah.
And yet that still happens, I think, to this day, whether unknown or unknown, spoken or unspoken. Right.
Massive change in dress codes in schools currently.
Right.
I think Sophie said East dress code is you have to have fabric in the front and the back. Isn't that pretty much the extent of it?
I don't know. I hope wears like crazy baggy stuff.
Yeah, you have
She's
to.
covered.
Oh, yeah, there has to be fabric in the front and the back, and the bottoms have to be at least of a sort of short or skirt. The extent of the fabric, I mean, I've seen, just pictures of school, the in shorts now where the pockets are longer than the short length, that is all within dress code. Ellie said at the junior high, there, it used to be you have to wear some sort of, it doesn't have to be a sleeve, but like a strap. They're getting away with that. You don't have to wear straps anymore. You don't have to, they're really just getting away with dress code. And one of the issues with dress code was, oh, I'm sorry, you can't learn today because I distract you.
Right.
The issue is, oh, you don't have personal responsibility. I mean, my house has a dress code, but but I look at dress code as more of, well, I just, there's a lot to it, but I have a dress code for my children. But girls have been taught over and over again, and biblically, you are responsible for a man's action. What a man isn't being taught is, oh, guess what? Your actions, you are responsible for them. No, and it's same in the Bible, adultery. I paused it.
Yeah.
Let's get over that.
And same with divorce. The the men have all the upper hand here, so they can divorce willy-nilly, and they can adulterize willy-nilly, but the law says some specific things about what happens to the wife of the divorcee,
Well, I didn't keep you happy.
Right.
Yeah, my responsibility. Keep you happy?
Yeah, so it's so I think at this point in the Sermon on the Mount, there are some people standing there in the crowd, men who are starting to look at each other with a raised eyebrow going, "Oh, this wasn't the party I thought I was coming to."
The divorce certificate in the Old Testament was basically to protect the woman, so that a man couldn't just throw her out on her own, resources, marry her and just throw her away. It was to protect, but it had been manipulated into a way of, I just have to write the certificate that I'm free. And it had been used by men to very much victimize women in another way. So, yeah.
I think at a deeper level, at least the way I read it, is that it matters what's in your heart. Like you can live in a society and you can manipulate rules where you're like, maybe you're convince yourself, okay, you're okay. But like, if you're in your heart, you're not being like merciful and kind and treating people fairly and loving people. If you're not doing that in your heart, he's saying it kind of doesn't matter what else is going on.
So true.
Right.
Which I think is an important message.
A huge message. Yeah, absolutely. That's why it's endured. Right.
Like if you're trying to justify yourself, you're probably, if you're explaining your losing.
Do you do things for yourself only for selfish reasons, or do you do it for the good of others?
And this is where legalism leads us. It leaves us with the excuse that we don't have to do things for the right motives. We just have to comply with the letter of the law. So what Charity says is very important. Absolutely. Yeah.
And we're all going to come up short. I mean, none of us can have just pure love in our all the time.
Right.
So
do your best.
So my question is, being human, you are gonna lust after, you know, there are gonna be times when you run into maybe somebody you meet that you're gonna lust after. But if you don't act on it and you try and shut it out, is that still sinful? I mean, it's just a human thing, you know, it's just like.
I think Jesus is speaking to power here.
Oh.
He's speaking to a certain mindset that men have, that they're viewing women as inherently sinful because they cause these lustful emotions in people, and it's all the woman's fault. You know, and Jesus is trying to turn this on his head and said, no, you know, you're just using this as an excuse. The problem is with you, and you're just using this as an excuse, a way to manipulate women, to control them.
Wasn't it Jimmy Carter who was apologizing, who was telling God that he had lusted after another woman and he felt it was sinful?
Jimmy Swaggart.
Jimmy Swaggart.
No, Jimmy Carter was asked in an interview if he had ever sinned, and he said, well, I have to admit, I have lusted after a woman in my heart. And he was just being honest, you know, saying, yeah, I'm human. I have had lustful thoughts. Yeah.
I think Jimmy Swaggart was not sincere.
Yeah.
He got caught. So he was like blubbering on TV.
But we're all gonna come up short with these rules, and I think, you know, that would be honest with Jimmy Carter. I think, you know, part of this is, are you treating a person like a person, or are you dehumanizing other people and treating them as objects or a means to your end, and not? A lot of this is just, in my reading, just all of us are valuable, and we need to treat all of us, even the people who are completely considered worthless by society, women, the poor.
Yeah, and in these last two examples, the marginalized person is the woman, you know, and that's kind of where he's getting to. Does he really mean go poke your eye out and cut off your hand? No, it's hyperbole, right? But he's trying to get their attention, you know, and just say, like, it's, you know, this is where these things, this lusting in your heart can be, if you're not able to control yourself, you can make some really poor decisions that really affect and harm other people, particularly women.
So a thought that came to my mind during this conversation is going back to the old saying that the Bible was written by a man.
Yeah.
I mean,
and the law that they're referencing was written by men. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's always in the lens, but I think the nature of Jesus being a man, a Judaic man, speaking these things, you can already see this early in this gospel, if you didn't know anything else, that, oh, this guy's life's going to be in danger.
Oh yeah.
This is a big threat to the status quo.
I think the hyperbole too serves to like we're not accepting excuses from you.
Right.
Because you could see all the ways a man in that culture could justify his act. And he's like, actually, if your hand is doing that without you even wanting it to do it, you can chop it off.
But it's
like
hard.
I'm excuses.
Yeah.
It's very much like it is on you, even if you have to like chop your hand off.
Yeah.
Which is pretty strong language.
Well, and think too about, I'm gonna go there, but the things that we cling to, that we kind of use the law or the law of our country to hide under, and I think in the Second Amendment, just saying, well, the law says I can have a gun. So, right. But, Jesus, if they're doing this speech today, would say, bring me your guns, I'm going to melt them down right now, because you don't need a weapon.
What you're saying, we all know people that make excuses about everything, and it just is, and ultimately it's a way for them to back out of their responsibility in that act.
Right.
They don't want to say, oh yeah, I did that, I'm at fault. I did it because of this. Okay. That still doesn't, get rid of your responsibility in doing that.
It just seems to me like the overarching thing in all of this is, Jesus saying something to the effect that, I almost think of it in terms of false idols, whether it's wealth or social status or gender or any of those things, there was that tendency for people to think that, oh, well, I'm of this status, so I must be in God's favor. Or I know the law, so I must be in God's favor. Or I have wealth, so I must be in God's favor.
Right.
And a lot of this has to do with the fact, no, in fact, those things can actually keep you from holiness, from self-awareness, from entering that internal kingdom. And that doesn't, because I don't think every Pharisee was bad. I don't think every scribe was bad. There were probably some very spiritually evolved people. But as a class, that was kind of the perception that was promoted, and which just exacerbated the problem of the, lower class people. They didn't have any of those tangible evidences that they were righteous or holy or whatever.
Yeah.
They were poor. They had no social status. They were disposable. So it again.
And that the thought of being not in God's favor, if you were in that underclass, was pretty prevalent, even to this day.
Right. Well, good stuff today, everybody. Any other thoughts, anyone? I know it's weird. You would think, knowing me, that I'd want to finish out the chapter, but I don't really think the chapter divisions help us here. It's all one big sermon. So we'll just pick up where we left off next time.
Verse 33.
I will not be with you next week or the week after. Just have a conference and some personal travel in there too.
Have internet problems.
No, you're gonna be great. You're gonna be great.
Oh, the time you were gone and he was gone, none of us could figure out. Like, the Lauren tried, but that also the Comcast working on the.
I think that was it.
Well, I'll talk to Comcast and say hands off for a couple of weeks.
Right.
It would be great.
Good.
It was stormy day that day too.
Yeah.
Fine.
You're gonna be great. All right, thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, bye.
Feel better, David?